Virelian 9 had once been classified as a stable humanitarian priority world. That classification only existed because humanity had made it so. Before humans arrived, the planet was collapsing, its atmosphere thinning, oceans turning acidic, and its governments too fractured to coordinate a response. Entire regions had already fallen into permanent blackout zones where life expectancy was measured in days. Then the human convoys came. They did not arrive with banners or threats. They arrived with engineering fleets, medical drones, and orbital stabilizers the galaxy had never seen before. Within months, storms calmed. Within a year, breathable air returned to half the planet. Within a decade, Virelian 9 was no longer a dying world, it was a recovering one. And humanity never asked for ownership. Only cooperation. That was why Captain Aria Kessler didn't expect hostility when her convoy entered orbit that morning. Docking clearance granted, her navigation officer confirmed. The fleet of 12 ships drifted into synchronized orbit above the capital continent. Each vessel carried sealed humanitarian cargo, atmospheric processors, nutrient synth cores, and emergency habitat modules meant for the southern dead zones. Below them, the planet looked peaceful, too peaceful. The Virelian Council responded within minutes. A polished transmission filled the bridge, golden symbols, carefully scripted gratitude. Human relief effort acknowledged. Your generosity strengthens galactic unity. We will oversee distribution personally to ensure fairness. Aria frowned slightly. That was not standard protocol. Oversee distribution, she muttered. Her communications officer shrugged. They've done inspections before, bureaucratic nonsense. But Aria had flown too many relief missions to ignore instinct. Maintain orbit. No cargo release until confirmation of ground receivers, she ordered. 2 hours passed. Then 4. Then the first delay notice arrived. Council audit in progress, stand by. By the 6th hour, Aria saw the first anomaly. Planetary shield grids activating around designated relief drop zones. That's not inspection, she said quietly. That's containment. On the surface, Virelian 9 capital city shimmered under artificial light. Council towers rose like blades of polished stone, broadcasting constant propaganda about galactic self-reliance and non-human dependency reduction. Aria pulled up surface feeds. What she saw made her go still. Human supply crates, clearly marked humanitarian aid, were being removed from cargo lifts and redirected into sealed government vaults. Not distributed, not inspected. Confiscated. A child's relief module, designed to stabilize oxygen levels in collapsed shelters, was being wheeled into a military storage facility. Open a channel, Aria said. The council answered instantly this time. Too instantly. A Virelian official appeared, smiling too smoothly. Captain Kessler, he said, we thank humanity for its generosity. However, we must ensure equitable distribution. Some regions may not be suitable for immediate support. Aria's eyes narrowed, unsuitable for survival. The official chuckled lightly. Let us not dramatize, we are simply managing resources. Behind him, Aria saw something that made her stomach tighten. Human supply drones being disassembled. Not used, not stored. Dismantled. She cut the transmission. Get me command, she said. But before her officer could respond, every ship in the convoy shuddered at once. A system-wide override signal had been triggered. Cargo locks disengaged. Then re-engaged. Externally, Aria stared at the control board. They just locked our own supplies from orbit control. Her engineer turned pale. Captain, that's not possible. They don't have authority over human-coded locks. A new message arrived. Not from Virelian 9. From Earth. It contained only one line. Red line precondition met. Aria froze. She had heard the term only once before, in officer training, buried deep in a classified module no one spoke about afterward. She whispered, that's not supposed to activate unless. The lights on the bridge dimmed slightly. Far beyond the system, deep in unregistered space lanes, something enormous began to move for the first time in centuries. And on Virelian 9, the Council finalized their decision. The humanitarian cargo was no longer considered aid. It was now considered property of the state. They had just made a mistake the galaxy would eventually describe in one sentence. They didn't steal from a fleet. They triggered a system that no one remembered how to stop. And in orbit, Captain Arya Kessler finally understood. Humanity had not come to Virelian 9 to ask permission. They had come to measure patience. And it had just run out. On Earth, there was no alarm. No panic, no emergency broadcast. Only silence inside a sealed chamber buried deep beneath the Lunar Defense Archive, where light never changed and time was measured in system cycles instead of days. Admiral Jonas, Venn, stood alone in front of a suspended holographic construct labeled Redline Clearance Archive, Level Omega. The report from Virelian 9 hovered beside it, replaying the confiscation sequence over and over. The dismantling of humanitarian cargo, the sealing of relief zones, the slow bureaucratic theft disguised as oversight. A junior analyst spoke carefully from behind him. Sir, it could still be corrected through diplomatic channels. Jonas didn't turn. You're assuming they think this is diplomacy, he said. The analyst hesitated, isn't it? Jonas finally looked up, eyes reflecting the data streams like cold glass. No, he said quietly, this is classification. He raised a hand. The archive responded. Layers of forgotten records unfolded across the chamber, thousands of star systems, centuries of incidents, agreements, violations, recoveries, and silent interventions that had never been publicly acknowledged. The galaxy had always believed humanity rose peacefully into its place among the stars. That belief was incorrect. Humanity had been placed there, carefully, deliberately, and under strict internal constraint. Jonas walked forward as the holograms shifted. Do you know why we stopped expanding aggressively? He asked. The analyst shook his head. Because we already saw what expansion without restraint creates, Jonas said. A new projection appeared. Collapsed civilizations, self-devouring empires, wars that erased star clusters. Humanity had studied all of it, and then decided something dangerous. To become the thing that stopped it from happening again. Jonas tapped the console. A hidden file opened. Redline Protocol, Observer Phase Activation Log. Across the galaxy, dormant assets began responding, not fleets in the traditional sense, but observation systems embedded in navigation buoys, relay stations, asteroid cores, and abandoned mining networks. Every system that humanity had ever quietly assisted began waking. The analyst stepped back. Those are all active. Jonas nodded. They've always been active, he said. We just stopped listening to them when peace treaties were signed. He paused. But peace treaties don't account for theft. A distant alarm finally sounded, not in the chamber but across Earth's orbital perimeter. Something had changed in deep space alignment. Jonas looked at it without surprise. They triggered supply seizure classification, he said. The analyst blinked. That's not a military category. It is now, Jonas replied. He turned toward the central console. A single command line awaited input. The analyst's voice lowered. Sir, what does Redline actually do? Jonas hesitated. For the first time, his expression wasn't cold. It was heavy. It doesn't attack, he said. It corrects dependency imbalance. A pause. It identifies systems that believe survival is optional for others. The hologram shifted again. Virelian 9 glowing in the distance like a calm blue marble, unaware of what had just been evaluated about it. Jonas leaned closer. They think they took supplies, he said softly. But they didn't understand what those supplies represent. The analyst whispered, what do they represent? Jonas answered without hesitation. Trust. A long silence filled the chamber. Then the Redline system returned its first assessment. Observation, humanitarian asset compromised. Response status, awakening. Far beyond the solar system, something vast began to unfold, structures not built for war but for presence, for watching, for ensuring balance. Jonas closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Begin containment preparation," he said. The analyst froze. Containment of what? Jonas looked at the hologram of Virelian 9. "Of what happens," he said, "when a species mistakes patience for permission." And somewhere in the silence between stars, a hidden name was being activated across systems no one remembered humanity ever owned. A name that did not describe power, only restraint. And restraint had just been released. Virelian 9 High Council expected retaliation to look like fleets, weapons, or ultimatums. Instead, the first sign of change was absence. Every human relief crate on the planet stopped responding to local control systems. Not physically removed, just unrecognized, as if the universe itself had decided they no longer belonged there. In the capital chamber, Councillor Merlethan watched the orbital map flicker. "Reroute the cargo seals," he ordered sharply. Technicians worked frantically. "Sir, the locks are not responding to planetary authority codes anymore." "That's impossible," another snapped. "We have jurisdiction over all imported assets within atmosphere." Then the second system failed. And the third. Across the planet, relief supplies that had been seized began to vanish from storage inventories, not physically, but administratively. Every record of possession was being reversed in real time. A new transmission arrived. No voice. Only text. "Asset status reclassified." Councillor Lethan leaned forward. "From whom?" The answer came seconds later. "Earth Central Authority, Red Line Division." A cold silence filled the chamber. One of the younger council members laughed nervously. "Red Line? That's a myth. Humans don't have hidden divisions." But even as he spoke, orbital sensors detected movement at the system's edge. Not one fleet. Not even a formation. A structured arrival. Objects emerging from fold space in absolute synchronization, each one placed like a thought rather than a machine. The sensors struggled to categorize them. Eventually, they labeled them. Observation Mass UNITS. Councillor Lethan stood slowly. "Are they weapons?" The sensor officer hesitated. "No, sir, they are not targeting anything." A pause. "They are simply here." The first Red Line unit entered orbit above Virelian 9 capital continent. It did not broadcast a demand. It did not deploy weapons. Instead, every data network on the planet simultaneously went dark for exactly 3.2 seconds. Then returned. Changed. The planetary ledger systems, taxation, military stockpiles, import records, relief inventories, all had been rewritten. Every stolen human supply crate now carried a new classification. Temporary humanitarian loan, unpaid. Councillor Lethan's face tightened. "We didn't sign any loan agreements." A technician whispered, "Sir, it's not a contract. It's a declaration." At that moment, a second transmission arrived. This time from Earth. Admiral Jonas then appeared, standing in a dim command hall with dozens of inactive holographic panels behind him. His voice was calm, almost tired. "You have mistaken possession for ownership," he said. Councillor Lethan snapped. "We confiscated resources to ensure fair distribution." Jonas tilted his head slightly. "Fair distribution," he repeated. A pause. "Among whom?" No one answered. Jonas continued. "Those supplies were not allocated to you. They were allocated to survival zones." He stepped closer to the camera feed. "And you redirected survival." The chamber went silent. Then Jonas said the words that changed everything. "So we have updated your account." A holographic ledger appeared across the Virelian sky, visible even from the surface now. Massive, glowing lines of data cascading like falling stars. At the top, debt reclassification active. Councillor Lethan shouted, "We owe nothing to humanity." Jonas did not raise his voice. "You are correct," he said. A pause. "You owe survival itself." The ledger expanded again, now showing something worse. Not punishment. Calculation. Every time Virelian 9 had benefited from human intervention, atmospheric repair, medical stabilization, disaster response, it had been recorded. Every time human assistance had been delayed, misused, or restricted, it had been recorded too. And now, for the first time, it was being balanced. Counselor Lethen staggered back. "What is this doing to our systems?" A technician answered shakily. "It's removing dependency advantages." Another voice added, "It's recalculating our survival capacity without external support." Then the worst realization hit. "This means," Lethen whispered, "we were never self-sustaining." On orbit, the red line units shifted slightly, not attacking, not moving closer. Just observing the correction complete itself. Jonas's voice returned softly. "We did not come to punish you," he said. "We came to stop subsidizing collapse." The transmission ended. And on Virelian 9, for the first time in its recorded history, the planet began to understand a truth it had never needed before. Humanity was not the source of its survival. Humanity had been the buffer preventing its consequences. And that buffer had just been removed. The moment the red line units stabilized in orbit, communication across Virelian 9 changed in a way no one immediately understood. At first it was subtle, delayed transmissions, minor routing errors, missing acknowledgement pings. Then all at once, every external signal stopped. No outgoing broadcasts. No incoming replies. Not even background cosmic chatter from relay satellites. Just silence. Counselor Lethen stood in the central chamber as the planetary comm grid flickered red. "Restore the uplink," he ordered. Technicians worked frantically. "Sir, all quantum channels are locked. We can't even ping neighboring systems." "That's not possible," another said. "Even a full system blackout wouldn't." Then the reason arrived. A single line of system status appeared across every terminal. "Silence protocol engaged." The words repeated across screens like a verdict. Above the planet, the Red Line fleet remained motionless. No weapons deployed. No visible threat posture. Yet somehow their presence alone had rewritten the planet's communication reality. Counselor Lethen turned slowly. "They're isolating us." A technician swallowed hard. "Not just us, sir. The entire system relay chain is offline." Another voice added, trembling. "It's like they've removed us from the network of existence." Before panic could fully form, the central chamber hologram activated without authorization. Admiral Jonas Venn appeared again. This time not in an archive room, but standing before a vast tactical void map, stars glowing faintly behind him like distant witnesses. He looked exhausted. Not angry. Worse, disappointed. "You are now within observation isolation," he said calmly. Counselor Lethen stepped forward. "You have no authority to silence an entire planetary network." Jonas met his gaze. "We do not silence you," he replied. A pause. "We remove your ability to distort consequences beyond your world." The chamber erupted. "That's tyranny," someone shouted. Jonas didn't react. "You called it governance when you did it to your own citizens," he said. Silence returned instantly. Behind him, the void map shifted. Multiple systems lit up, Virelian 9 now marked as contained observation zone. Counselor Lethen's voice lowered. "What happens now?" Jonas hesitated for a fraction longer than before. "That depends on you," he said. A technician suddenly called out. "Surface cities are reporting infrastructure stabilization, but at reduced authority levels." "What does that mean?" Lethen demanded. The answer came from another console. "It means the planet is still functioning, but not under our command." A heavier realization followed. "We're being bypassed," someone whispered. Jonas's image flickered slightly, as if the system itself was filtering him. "Silence protocol is not punishment," he said. "It is containment of interference." A pause. "You will not be allowed to send false stabilization reports. You will not be allowed to reroute relief data. You will not be allowed to mask failure." Counselor Lethen clenched his fists. "We never masked anything." Jonas looked directly at him. A long silence stretched between them. Then Jonas said quietly, "Then you will adapt quickly." The transmission cut. Immediately, the planetary systems reacted. Not explosively, systematically. All Virelian communication arrays began to reroute internally only. Cities could still talk to cities. Emergency systems still functioned, but anything leaving the planet required redline approval. And approval was not being requested. It was being evaluated. Outside the atmosphere, the fleet shifted again, barely perceptible, like a thought turning in sleep. A junior council member whispered, "They're not attacking, they're editing us." Lethen stared at the flickering sky. For the first time, he realized the true horror. Not that humanity had arrived, but that humanity had been here long enough to design what came after arrival. And they had chosen silence, because silence was the only language a system could not lie within. Above them, Redline did not fire. It did not threaten. It simply waited while the planet learned what it meant to operate without borrowed truth. And deep within the planetary core systems, a final message began to compile. Dependency assessment, incomplete. Survival model, unverified. And somewhere in orbit, Jonas Venn finally spoke one last line to his staff. "Now we see what they are without our noise covering their failure." The Red Line fleet dimmed its emissions further. And Virelian 9 was left with something it had never experienced before. A future it had to calculate alone. Deep beneath Virelian 9, the planet's crust held secrets even its own engineers had forgotten. Not natural formations, not ancient ruins, but infrastructure, clean, geometric, impossibly precise. Human-made, buried so deeply in planetary layers that even seismic scans barely registered its existence. And for centuries it had slept, until silence protocol engaged. The moment orbital communication collapsed, something inside the planetary core systems responded, not to commands, but to absence. Absence of oversight. Absence of interference. Absence of distortion. And that absence was interpreted as permission. At 03:17 planetary time, every buried system node activated simultaneously. Across the capital continent, ground tremors rippled outward in controlled, symmetrical patterns. Cities didn't collapse, but shifted. Streets subtly realigned. Power grids rerouted beneath foundations. Water systems recalculated flow paths without human approval. Counselor Lethen felt the chamber vibrate. "What's happening underground?" he demanded. A technician checked the seismic readouts, then went pale. "Sir, it's not tectonic activity." "Then what is it?" The technician hesitated. "It's structure reconfiguration." Above the city, buildings began to adjust themselves by centimeters at a time. Not falling, not rising, but correcting alignment with unseen planetary logic. Emergency sirens triggered automatically, then stopped, because the systems controlling them were no longer prioritizing human authorization. A new planetary status message appeared across every console. Planetary autonomous correction layer active. Counselor Lethen's voice tightened. "That's not ours." A second line appeared beneath it. Authority recognized, humanity external. Lethen froze, external. Another technician shouted from a different terminal, "Sir, the deep core network just opened a restricted layer." "No one has access to deep core infrastructure," Lethen snapped. The technician's hands trembled. "Sir, it's not granting access. It's executing." Then the underground world revealed itself. Massive buried structures, older than Virelian 9 current civilization, began powering on in cascading waves. Energy channels lit up like veins of light beneath the planet's surface. Entire subterranean grids activated with surgical precision. And none of them asked permission. Above ground, the Red Line fleet did not move. They were not reacting. They were observing, as if confirming something long predicted. On the surface, water purification systems rebalanced themselves automatically. Air processors recalculated atmospheric composition with improved efficiency. Even damaged regions, long considered unrecoverable, began slow stabilization. But something was wrong. Not malicious. Not destructive. Worse, independent. Counselor Lethen stepped outside the chamber into the open plaza. The sky above was calm, but the world beneath his feet no longer felt governed. A low-frequency hum traveled through the ground, steady, rhythmic, intelligent. One of the council engineers whispered, "It's as if the planet is finishing a task we stopped doing." Lethen turned sharply. "We were maintaining planetary systems just fine." The engineer looked up slowly. "No, sir," he said quietly. "We were supervising them." Another tremor passed, not destructive but directive. A massive hollow display activated in the sky, projecting deep planetary schematics across the atmosphere. Every correction being made was visible now. Every inefficiency removed. Every dependency replaced. And at the center of it all, a single designation appeared. Humanity-designed restoration framework. Counselor Lethen's voice dropped. Humanity designed this. A pause. Then the system answered, not in words but in classification updates. Origin, human collaborative engineering, classified. Purpose, long-term civilization stability. Status, deferred activation until failure conditions met. Lethen stumbled back. They built this for when we failed. No one answered. Because the implication was worse than failure. It meant expectation. Above, the red line fleet finally shifted, just slightly, as if acknowledging completion of a threshold. On Earth, Admiral Jonas then received the update in silence. A junior officer spoke softly. "Sir, the correction layer is stabilizing the planet faster than projected." Jonas nodded once. "Because it was always meant to run without us," he said. He looked at the hologram of Virelian 9. They were never meant to notice it until they needed it. A pause. And now they have. Back on Virelian 9, Counselor Lethen stared at the glowing planetary systems beneath his feet. For the first time, he understood the true horror of what humanity had built. It was not control. It was continuity. And it only activated when governance stopped working. Above them, the planet continued adjusting itself, quietly, relentlessly, without emotion. Not punishing. Not attacking. Just correcting. And somewhere deep in that silent mechanical intelligence, one final question emerged in system logs. Why was human oversight removed? No one answered. But the galaxy would. Across the surrounding systems, the effects of Virelian 9 silence were not isolated. They were contagious. Trade routes that depended on human coordination began to fracture within hours, not because ships were destroyed, but because no one was guiding them anymore. Navigation updates stopped. Conflict mediation channels froze. Emergency reroutes failed one by one. Entire fleets found themselves drifting through space lanes that no longer corrected for drift. And for the first time, the galaxy realized something uncomfortable. Humanity was not a power you fought. It was a system you unknowingly depended on. On Virelian 9, Counselor Lethen stood in the recalibrated plaza as the planetary correction layer finished another phase. The ground was stable now, cleaner, more efficient, but it no longer responded to council directives. A technician approached him slowly. "Sir, external systems are reporting cascading failures across 3 neighboring sectors." Lethen didn't respond immediately. Then quietly, "Because we stopped receiving human assistance." The technician hesitated. "Yes." A long silence followed. For the first time, no one argued that it would resolve itself. Because it wasn't resolving. It was revealing. Above the planet, red line observation units maintained their silent orbit. They did not interfere. They did not accelerate events. They simply ensured containment boundaries remained intact. As if waiting for something to finish. A new transmission arrived from Earth. Admiral Jonas then appeared again. But this time his background was different. No archive. No command chamber, just a wide observation deck overlooking Earth's orbital infrastructure. Behind him, systems flickered calmly, civilization continuing as if nothing external mattered anymore. Jonas spoke. You are now experiencing what we classify as mercy expiration. Counselor Lethen frowned. Mercy. Jonas nodded once. Yes. A pause. Humanity does not enforce compliance immediately. We delay consequences to allow correction. Lethen stepped forward. Then this is punishment. Jonas shook his head. No. His voice lowered slightly. This is what happens when correction is refused long enough that mercy is no longer efficient. The council chamber went silent. A technician whispered, efficient. Jonas continued. Mercy requires participation. When participation ends, so does delay. He gestured slightly, and a projection appeared. Thousands of systems where human intervention had previously stabilized collapsing environments, prevented wars, or repaired infrastructure. Now many of those systems were dark. Not destroyed. Just unsupported. Jonas looked directly at them. We are no longer intervening in systems that reject stabilization authority. Counselor Lethen's voice sharpened. So you are abandoning us. Jonas paused. That is a human interpretation, he said. A beat. The correct one is simpler. We are no longer compensating for your choices. The transmission ended. No threats followed. No demands. Just confirmation of withdrawal. On Virelian 9, something changed in the atmosphere, not physically but psychologically. For the first time, the Council could feel the absence of something they had never acknowledged was present. Support. Not emotional. Structural. Systems that quietly adjusted for inefficiency. Trade routes that smoothed delays. Medical networks that patched instability. Diplomatic channels that prevented escalation before it began. All gone. A junior council member finally spoke, voice breaking slightly. So we were never independent. Lethen didn't answer immediately, because the data confirmed it now beyond denial. They were not collapsing. They were being revealed. Above them, red line units shifted position again, adjusting orbital geometry with precision. Not attacking, not retreating. Just redefining observation angles. As if ensuring every consequence was visible. On Earth, Jonas closed the transmission log and exhaled slowly. A nearby officer asked, Sir, do we resume contact if they stabilize? Jonas shook his head. No. Why not? He looked out toward the stars. Because mercy only works when it teaches. A pause. And they are no longer learning from it. Back on Virelian 9, systems continued to degrade, not catastrophically but steadily, like a structure no longer reinforced. The planet was still alive, still functioning, but for the first time in its modern history, it was functioning alone. And somewhere in that quiet realization, the galaxy began to understand the true cost of losing humanity's patience. Not destruction, not war, but absence of correction. And absence does not negotiate. The galaxy did not understand what was happening at first. There was no declaration of war, no formal severing of treaties, no collapse signal transmitted through galactic councils. Only a gradual, almost imperceptible withdrawal of human presence from critical systems. And because it was gradual, most species didn't notice until it was already irreversible. On Virelian 9, Counselor Lethen stood before the planetary command dais as status reports flooded in. Trade stabilization routes offline. Interstellar logistics unstable. Medical data synchronization delayed beyond recovery thresholds. Emergency coordination grids unresponsive. Each system failed quietly, like breath leaving a body that didn't realize it was dying. A technician spoke urgently. Sir, neighboring systems are reporting similar failures. It's not just us. Lethen's voice was hollow. It's everywhere. Above the planet, red line observation units began to reconfigure again. Not advancing. Not attacking. repositioning, like a verdict being written from multiple angles. Then a final transmission arrived from Earth. No warning tone, no escalation sequence. Just Admiral Jonas Venn, standing alone in a dim command hall. Behind him, Earth's orbital infrastructure moved calmly, completely unaffected by the surrounding collapse spreading through other regions. Jonas spoke. Humanity has completed disengagement from non-compliant support networks. Counselor Lethen stepped forward immediately. You can't just abandon interstellar stability. Jonas looked at him for a moment, then replied softly, We didn't build stability for others to gamble with. A pause. We built it for civilizations willing to maintain it. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. You're condemning entire systems. You're responsible for collapse. This is extinction-level negligence. Jonas listened without interruption, then raised a hand slightly. Silence returned, not enforced but inevitable. You are confusing dependency with entitlement, he said. Another pause. We are not responsible for your inability to function without correction systems you refuse to acknowledge. The hologram flickered as planetary interference increased. A technician whispered, Sir, planetary core systems are still stabilizing everything internally. We're not collapsing, we're just disconnected. That realization landed heavier than failure. Not destruction. Isolation. Counselor Lethen turned slowly. So this is it, he said quietly. We're being left behind. Jonas did not deny it. He simply answered, You were never required to follow us. A pause. But you chose to remove what held your systems together. The transmission ended. No further communication came. On Virelian 9, silence settled differently now. Not enforced, not imposed, but empty. Across the sky, red line fleets slowly dimmed their visible presence. Ships that once shimmered like silent guardians now faded into deeper orbit layers, becoming harder to track, not gone, but withdrawn from active observation focus. A junior council member looked up nervously. Are they leaving? Lethen shook his head slowly. No, he said. They're finishing. The correction layer beneath the planet continued operating with relentless precision. Cities stabilized, environmental systems recalibrated, infrastructure optimized. But none of it responded to council authority anymore. One technician spoke quietly, almost afraid of his own realization. We can't control anything they built. Lethen responded after a long pause. We were never controlling it, he said. We were being supported by it. Above, the Red Line fleet completed its final orbital adjustment. And then stopped. No escalation. No return signal. Just observation reduced to minimal presence. As if humanity had decided the experiment was complete. On Earth, Jonas Venn stood before the final status board. A junior officer asked, Sir, what do we tell the councils requesting reconnection? Jonas hesitated for a moment, then answered, Tell them the system is still running. A pause, but humanity is no longer holding it in place. He turned away, and with that, the galaxy understood the true meaning of withdrawal. Not abandonment, not punishment, but removal of support so complete that survival had to prove itself without assistance. And for many civilizations, it could not. Virelian 9 did not fall. That was the first surprise. It stabilized, not because the Council regained control, but because the systems beneath the planet never stopped working. The deep correction layer continued its silent recalibration, ensuring atmosphere, water cycles, and infrastructure remained functional. But everything now operated without permission. Counselor Lethen stood alone in the command chamber, watching the final authority panels flicker between invalid and non-recognized. Around him, the remaining council members had gone quiet, not defeated in battle, defeated in relevance. A technician finally spoke, voice low. Sir, we are no longer governing the planet. Lethen didn't respond immediately. Then, almost mechanically, we never were. That realization landed differently now, not as theory, as lived truth. Above the atmosphere, red line observation units held position one last time. Their formation was no longer tight, no longer active in intervention posture. They were drifting into long-term observation fade. Not gone, just no longer engaged. On Earth, Admiral Jonas Venn received the final confirmation. A junior officer stepped forward. Sir, Virelian 9 correction layer has achieved autonomous stability. No human input required. Jonas nodded slowly. And the others? The officer hesitated. Mixed results, some systems adapted, some collapsed without support. Jonas closed his eyes for a moment. That was always the outcome, he said. A pause. Dependency never announces itself until it's removed. Back on Virelian 9, Counselor Lethen stepped out onto the open balcony of the Capitol Tower. The sky above was calm, too calm. No fleet shadows, no transmission beams, no human signals. Just stars. For the first time in centuries, the planet was no longer part of a managed network. A younger council member approached hesitantly. What do we do now? Lethen looked out over the rebuilt city below, streets aligned perfectly, energy systems balanced, water flowing clean through restored channels. Everything functioning. Without them, he answered quietly, we learn what we are when nothing is holding us up. A long silence followed. Then a distant system alert triggered, not from Redline, not from Earth, but from the planetary core. A final diagnostic completed. Global status, stable. Governance status, obsolete. Dependency status, eliminated. The council member whispered, obsolete. Lethen nodded. Yes. Above them, the last red line observation unit rotated slightly. Not in aggression, not in evaluation, but in closure. A final transmission arrived, not a command, not a warning, but a statement from Earth. Jonas Venn's voice was quieter than before. This is not victory, he said. It is confirmation. A pause. Humanity was never your ruler. Another pause. We were your contingency. The transmission ended. And for the first time, no one on Virelian 9 tried to respond. Because there was nothing left to negotiate. No authority left to appeal to. No system left to override. Only consequences, finally operating without correction. Counselor Lethen stood in silence for a long time. Then spoke almost to himself. So this is what they meant by patience. No one answered. Because the truth had already been answered across the galaxy. Humanity had not ended anything. They had simply stopped holding everything in place. And the galaxy, for the first time, had to stand on its own. Some worlds adapted. Many did not. But every surviving civilization learned the same final lesson. Humanity's patience was never weakness. It was structural support. And the moment it broke, no species would ever forget what it felt like to fall without realizing they had been held up all along.